not consent to be recorded. Please tune out now, and that would be your sign to know that we're recording the program. I want to try to turn off the transcriber, and that's my goal, which I think I did. Okay. So welcome to our webinar today, folks. Unlocking New Markets with Confidence, Understanding the FTA tariff tool and how to be compliant. Tariffs are our big thing in the news today, and so we hope to give you the tools to be successful globally in international markets. My name is Mark Cooper. I'm the director of the U.S. Department of Commerce office here in Indianapolis, and my job is to work with you to help you expand internationally. We're connected to all the U.S. embassies around the world. Many of you have been on my webinars and our webinars for years. We partner with the Indiana District Export Council called the IDEC, and we do these webinars, and Andrew Ranke, who is our chair, will be telling you about the DEC and its role in a minute. And he will be introducing my great friend and colleague who I've known for many years on this webinar. He will be giving the formal introduction of her, but suffice it to say, we're delighted to have you here because time is of the essence and people are busy. I will turn it to Mr. Andrew Ranke, who is the chair of the Indiana District Export Council, to make a couple of remarks and introduce our key speaker. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks, Mark. You do a great job for the Indiana DEC and for exporters across the state, as always. You've been doing that for quite a while. Your partnership is valued. So a little bit about us. Welcome, everybody. The District Export Council, we're a not-for-profit organization that works within the auspices of the U.S. Department of Commerce, within and with Mark Cooper's office. And we promote and support exporting as a way to strengthen Indiana companies, grow the state's economy, and create jobs. We offer one-on-one counseling, workshops, and webinars, and serve as a focal point of export information and resources for companies across the state. Each state has an export council. I'd like to think that every key entity in the state of Indiana that touches on trade through government, through private sector, through service, through state resources is either a partner to the DEC or serves on our DEC. So for more information, please visit our website, indianadec.org. This is another webinar in a series we call Export Lunch and Learns. We have one every other month. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted to the DEC website under past events and also in our export training library. I want to acknowledge the other DEC members that are joining today. Nate Lamar from Batesville Services, Paula Vandevanner from Indy Partnership, Indy Chamber, Tom Miller from PNC Bank, Christine Everett from IU Kelly School of Business, Dr. Toby Malachi Group Worldwide, and Ken Ebbing from InZone, Greater Indianapolis Foreign Trade Zone. Kent is a great resource for those of you that are importing goods and want to have an idea of best ways to mitigate the tariffs on the inbound shipments. And he presented a couple of months ago in that webinar on mitigating inbound tariffs is posted on our website as well. I also want to thank our partners, SBA, Exim Bank, IU Cyber, Indiana SBDC, Purdue, MEP, the International Center, and the Indy Chamber. Today's webinar is the second this year, as I mentioned, on tariffs. The Indiana DEC doesn't revisit a topic in trade for a few years normally unless warranted. And recently, with the trade policy initiatives by the White House, it demands that we again revisit the issue. And it's, as Mark mentioned, a timely topic. So with all the tariff turmoil and its impact on, and a potential impact on our ability to export our products to our foreign markets, any foreign tariff, and to know any foreign trade or tariff changes on U.S. exporting, knowing which countries have imposed retaliatory tariff hikes on U.S. goods is a must. To do that, we've invited probably the most seasoned expert within the U.S. Department of Commerce on FTAs to help us utilize the free online tariff tools to do exactly that. Meredith Bond is the director of the U.S. Commercial Service in Omaha, where she helps businesses across Nebraska and Southwest Iowa grow through international trade. A nationwide export on free trade agreements, she supports clients and colleagues navigating global markets. Meredith is the Mark Cooper of Nebraska. And a little better looking than Mark, but
Yeah, I gotta agree.
so we're very pleased to have her and Mark with us today, as always, but to help specifically navigate and use the FTA tariff tool and other tools. Meredith, again, thank you. Welcome to Indiana, and I'll turn the floor over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you to the deck and all the partners, and of course, Mark, who I've been working with for many, many years, and it's always a pleasure. So I am going to share a presentation now. Let's see. There it is. Good. It should come right up. So I have a lot of slides, and again, we have a PDF of the slides to share with you. I'm going to move through some of them quite quickly, but I want you to have them as reference. So if you've already seen how many there are, don't be worried. We'll get through it. I am not going to be able to see the chat while I'm presenting, so Andrew and Mark are going to kind of monitor that for questions. If I need to clarify anything immediately, I'll do that. Otherwise, we'll save some of them for the end. I've done many presentations on this topic, and sometimes the questions get really specific to your company's situation. So if we don't get to that because it doesn't apply to enough folks, we will definitely follow up with you and try and get you the answers that you need. So if you think of a question, feel free to put it in the chat at any time, but I might not get to it until we're done. So benefits of free trade agreements, they still exist. For all the talk on tariffs and retaliatory tariffs, because we're still in that kind of pause part where negotiations are going on, a lot of our trading partners are still kind of on their best behavior. The only one that I'm really aware of where we have a free trade agreement and there are retaliatory tariffs in place are Canada, and that is on a very specific list of products, which you can look up. The Canadians are very good about websites and sharing information online. So right now, if you are a U.S. exporter, the free trade agreements are still a benefit for you to probably have zero tariffs on your goods going into that partner country. That may change. As we've learned, everything can change at any time. But for right now, it's still a benefit. And actually, a lot of what I'll talk about, the process of figuring out origin and whether it's originating, is just a general thing to be knowledgeable about in trade, because you're always going to be asked, what's the origin of your product? And it might not be specific to an FTA, but the concepts kind of all apply and will make sense to you as you look at that for your products. So I've got a couple of slides that do talk about what's going on right now. And keep in mind, our focus is on U.S. exports. I realize there are a lot of questions on imports into the U.S. I did put a few links into the chat before we got started so that you can see it with a few different kinds of resources, newsletters that you can keep an eye on, government sites that will tell you what's going on. I just came across the one that I listed on trade.gov, the Foreign Retaliations Database. That's kind of a new one for me, which I thought was very handy. I'm not sure who in our headquarters is putting that together, but I was happy to find it. So I assume that will be updated as things change. Again, right now we're kind of in a pause. Everyone is on their best behavior trying to do a negotiation, so not a lot of retaliatory tariffs are in place on U.S. goods just yet. I referenced here the NADEC email. It came out on July 8th. That is the National Association of District Export Councils. So Indiana is represented there. The Nebraska DEC is represented there. And I've put that at the end. So if you're a DEC member, you may have gotten that email. If you're not a DEC member, I threw in a couple of slides where I pasted in this email. It was a really great summary of kind of where we were last week after that first deadline passed. And again, it got extended. So that's a good resource. Again, Canada, and you'll have this, so that is the list of specific goods, and it's not everything, but there's a list of specific goods where Canada is imposing a 25% tariff, and that's whether or not it qualifies for USMCA. So even if it qualifies for USMCA, if it's on that list, it's still going to be subject to that 25% tariff. China also has put retaliatory, we don't have a free trade agreement with China, but they have put retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods. The European Union is talking about it. They're kind of making a list, but they have not put it into place yet. Again, we don't have an FTA with anyone in Europe. And then that is a new link, and I put that in the chat. That is that foreign retaliations database that I found on our website, trade.gov. And trade.gov is just a good one to remember in general. Almost everything I'm talking about you can find there, and including the FTA tariff tool, which we'll break out of the PowerPoint at some point and have a look at. We'll plug some numbers into that. So these are the countries where we have free trade agreements in place right now. Most of them we've had for quite a while. USMCA is the newest. That went into effect in 2020. But as you know, that was based on NAFTA, which is one of our oldest free trade agreements. So it was kind of updated. It changed a few rules. It made a few things a little more strict. But for a lot of products, it was nearly identical to NAFTA. It changed a few things around the margins, and especially in the auto industry, which I know is near and dear to Indiana's heart. And I am sorry if you are in that industry and life got more complicated for you. But certainly automotive parts has always been a complicated part of any free trade agreement. It's an industry that we have that we want to take care of. So they make the rules a little bit harder than some of the other rules for other goods that we'll look at. So this is where we have FTAs. We have a couple different kinds. We'll talk about that. But how do you get the benefit of a free trade agreement? Make sure your product qualifies, and that's what we're going to talk about. How do you look at the rules and make sure your product qualifies? If you've done that, you've done your homework, you have to let your customer know somehow. A lot of questions we get start off as documentation questions, but really are, does it actually qualify or not? And you have to dig a little bit deeper. Please keep in mind, just because your product is shipped from the U.S. or made in the U.S., which might just be assembled, it doesn't automatically mean that it qualifies under the free trade agreement. That's why we have to look at specifically at the rules, especially if it's a manufactured product. So rules vary, but what they all come back to is this concept of value added. Have you really added content and labor, design work from within that family of free trade agreement countries that are part of the agreement you're qualifying for? So why do you have to do that? It's to ensure those benefits are enjoyed by U.S. companies and companies in that partner country that's part of the FTA, and it's to prevent third country producers from passing their goods through and calling them origin of one thing and trying to take advantage of that. If it's not really a product with value added, it's not going to get to do that if it's looked at the rules. Why does it matter? The burden of proof is on you as the exporter. The claim is made by the importer, and they might get the first phone call, but your importer, your customer most of the time, is going to rely on you to provide them that research. How did you come to the conclusion that this qualifies? And you can be audited. You can be audited by that foreign customs authority. It doesn't always happen. Canada is the most common one that I've seen a few companies audited by, but they do have the right to follow up. If you don't have any assets in that country, there's not a whole lot they can do other than maybe put an extra fine on your future imports or possibly even block you completely from shipping into that country. But you can be audited. So you want to do it upfront, do the homework, get it right, and make sure that your paperwork is accurate. So origin versus originating. Country of origin is a little more broad. It is where the product was made, it was produced, it's where it became what it is at the end of the assembly line, or when you put it in a box, where did it become that thing? If it was in your factory, then the origin is U.S. Originating is a little bit different. That is complying specifically with a rule of origin from that free trade agreement. And we'll talk about how you find those and then how you apply them. And again, I'll reiterate, just because it's made in the U.S. doesn't automatically mean that it qualifies for the free trade agreement. So made in the USA, which comes up as part of this conversation, is something very specific, marking your product made in the USA. And that is regulated by the Federal Trade Commission. And there's a link here. And they have some pretty specific rules on what you can and can't call made in the USA. Now, all their enforcement is really in the US. So if you're shipping a product overseas and you call it made in the USA, the FTC is not really looking at that. They're looking at what's sold in the US market that's marked that way and did it comply with the rules. But it's still, again, a very handy way to look at a set of rules and be like, I know I meet these. Certainly my origin is USA. So that may also be a good resource to have a look at. But what they're really concerned about with is sales in the U.S. market, not so much internationally, although that comes up with free trade agreement origin. What is the origin of this good? So let's say you do all this homework and it doesn't qualify. Unfortunately, maybe you don't meet the rules. Can you still send the product? Of course you can, but your customer or whoever the importer is cannot check that box that it qualifies for the free trade agreement, and you might have to pay a duty. And we'll have a look at how you compare that, what you may or may not have to pay depending if it qualifies for an FTA or not. But you can certainly still ship it. And in fact, I'll take it even one step further. If you don't want to do any of this homework, if you don't want to go through this exercise to qualify your products for any U.S. free trade agreements, you don't have to. It is not required. It is purely at your discretion. Your buyer's certainly going to want to save, 6 or 10% or whatever it would be if there were a duty on it otherwise. So it's more of a customer service issue than it is a customs issue. It's totally up to you if you want to put in the time to do this research to see if it qualifies. It is not required to do business with any of these countries. So determining the preferential tariff rate. Now we're going to leave this presentation real quickly and we're going to go out on the web. The FTA tariff tool that you'll hear reference, I'm going to look through that and I'm going to show you what it does and doesn't do. It's sort of useful, it truly is, but I think that second link, the customs info database, that's the one I use all the time. I think that's much, much more useful to us. And then there's also the rules of origin facilitator. We're not really going to take a look at that, but I'll mention it because it's very handy if you have a very global production process, and if you're producing somewhere and sending to a third country, it doesn't even involve the United States. If you want to look up to see if these two countries where you're producing a good and shipping it to have a free trade agreement, that rules of origin facilitator is global, and it'll take a look at what the origin is and where you're sending it to and if there's any break. So it's just a good thing to also have bookmarked if you have a really international global production base. So I'm going to stop sharing this. And I'm going to share my browser. Mark or Andrew, are there any questions yet that I might address as we move here?
Nothing in the chat
Not yet.
Meredith.
Okay.
Nope.
Great. Okay, so this is the FTA tariff tool, and you've got the link to that. So I'm going to scroll down, and there, search FTA rates. So we are exporting goods from the United States to an FTA partner. I'm going to run a couple of samples here, and I'm going to run it through both of the tools that I mentioned. So we have a free trade agreement with Chile. I'm going to run this for Chile. I heard that there might be somebody on this call that sells silicone roofing materials. So I have that HS number. I'm going to plug it in here. 30, and you can really, as long as you've got at least a 4-digit, if you've got the full one, that's great. But as you may know, HS classifications are only H harmonized to the 6-digit level. So I'm just going to plug in the 4-digit level and see what my choices are. And I want to see this in primary forms. Let's see it. So it'll show me the HS code. It'll give me the description. I'm getting it in Spanish. How nice. I'll also get it in English. And then it'll talk about its staging basket. And for this good, it was immediate. So the U.S.-Chile Free Trade Agreement went into effect in 2004, and this product went duty-free on day one. So if it was a timed out implementation, it might say 6%, 3%, and then 0. But it's been duty-free for some time. So it went from 6% to 0. We can't get any lower than 0, so that's where it's going to stay. The other helpful thing here is it shows you what the rule of origin is. I'll give a little bit of a caveat there. This is probably the rule of origin from the original agreement text, and it doesn't happen a lot, but sometimes rules change. So if this was the rule from 2004, it's been over 20 years. It's possible it could have changed. So I will talk about where you find rules of origin and where I think maybe a more useful place to look up your rule is. But at least it'll give you an idea of the kind of rule you're looking at. So that's basically all the FTA tariff tool does. Is it 0 under the free trade agreement? So that's helpful. It shows you the rule of origin. It shows you what the base rate is, so it shows you probably what you were saving once it was implemented. And as I mentioned, our free trade agreements are all pretty old now. So most manufactured products, we are well past an implementation timeline, which for a lot of FTAs, like 12 years would have been a super long timeline. Most of them, a lot of goods go duty-free on day one, and almost everything else is duty-free within 5 years. Our FTAs are old. Almost everything that qualifies is probably going in at 0. So that's the FTA tariff tool. The other link that I had on that slide, and you'll have, is the customs info database. This is the one that I use all the time. And this is the page on trade.gov. If you are registered on trade.gov, which is free, you can come to this page, and then you're going to click on the tariff lookup tool. And this is a partner company that we've partnered with to get free access to looking at this. So it's a few clicks, but that's how you get to it. And then you can bookmark the final one once you've done it a few times. I'm an existing trade.gov user, so I'm going to log in here. It's already saved my email address, and I'm going to log in. So it doesn't look all that exciting, but it is really, really useful. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go and pick Chile, and I'm going to throw in that number, 3910. Then you've got to hit search, and it's going to show you, okay, these are all the different numbers under 3910. So I'm going to pick the one with the 0. And now you think, shouldn't it show it to me? There's another step. It's not intuitive, but you'll get used to it. Now I'm going to click on duties and taxes. This is your only option. The country of origin has to be the U.S., and the country of shipment you're sending from is the U.S. So then you hit calculate, and then it will show you something like this, which is really handy. So the general rate, if you were shipping from a non-FTA partner, would still be 6%. They haven't changed that since 2004. But tariff treatment 2, free trade agreement, United States, Chile, you are going in at 0. It is free. There's no tariff on that. The other nice thing about this, if there's a VAT, a value-added tax, it will show you what it is, and it will tell you how it's calculated. So CIF, that means it includes your freight, and then the VAT is going to be the CIF plus any duty, but we know our duty's free. So it's really the cost of the good and shipping the good is what we're going to.
Can you put
the
link in the chat?
I think I can put it in the chat. Let's see.
I know you put it in the other
chat. That's okay.
Yeah, you put it in the.
I'm gonna put this one in the chat. This is the trade.gov link.
Okay.
That's the trade.gov link. So you have to make sure you're registered there first And then again, you would click on this tariff lookup tool, and then you're an existing trade.gov user. So you'll put it in there. But then you're going to get to this. So I'm going to do one more. I also heard that there's someone on this call who makes wireless deer fences so your hostas don't get eaten. Very handy.
Yes.
Okay, let's take a look for that. And there it is, other. As you know, if you've been in the HS a lot, you get a lot of others. So again, you've got to click on that duties and taxes tab and then calculate. So again, the general rate is 35%. Now here's the crazy thing. Usually the general rate should be higher than the MFN rate. MFN, most favored nations rate, is we're a member of the WTO, you're a member of the WTO, here's your rate. So really, USMCA doesn't give you a break because we're both members of the WTO. It would be free either way. So you can decide if you want to go through qualifying it or not, although I have heard you get a break on a few things. Maybe it's still worth qualifying, and probably your customer is going to ask you for it. Again, a customer service issue more than a customs issue. And then for Canada, as you know, they have the GST. It'll talk about that. So as you can see here, there's no extra rate. And I mentioned that Canada has done some retaliatory tariffs. And I looked up one of those numbers, so I'm going to show you what that looks like. And they are updating this database. So if there is a retaliatory tariff, it should show up there. This happens to be for vacuum cleaners. And I'm going to show you what that looks like. So again, the USMCA rate is free, but see this additional US duty rate? That's 25%. So that's the 25% that Canada has tacked on to that list of products. This is one of those products. So I think this customs info database is very handy. I do look at the FTA tariff tool once in a while, but this is the one that I usually go to if I really want to know what the rate is and if I want to compare the rate with the FTA and without the FTA. So it'll show you what those are. Okay.
Meredith,
yes.
One question. How often is the Descartes website updated?
I tried to find that out. They said within 48 hours, and that's why I found that number to double check to make sure those Canada extra 25% were on there. And they were. They showed up. So
thank you.
That's what they say. But things are changing so fast that I don't know if anyone can keep up. Okay, right. So eventually what you might want to build is something that looks like this, a savings analysis where you're comparing, here's what the product, here's the tariff if we don't qualify it for the FTA, here's the base rate, and if we do qualify it, here's what our savings would be. Again, there may be some countries where the import rate is 0 anyway. Why should you bother to do the research and the paperwork? And the answer kind of comes down to, is your customer demanding it? Maybe it saves them some kind of processing fee. It's hard to know that for every single country. Rely on your customer, rely on your customs broker if you're the importer of record on the other side as well. But they should be able to tell you that. Is there any advantage to making that FTA claim besides the tariff rate savings? Sometimes there is, and sometimes the customer just demands it. And sometimes the customer might be buying your good, your product is a widget that they put into their product. So they've kind of got to prove that qualification all along because it counts for them in qualifying for the free trade agreement if they're putting it into a good that they might be shipping back to the United States. So again, is it worth it? Is it a customer service issue? And then you can decide. But at least building something like this will show you, how much you might be saving by doing the FTA homework. So what is needed to establish proof of origin? You certainly need the rule of origin, and you know that based on your harmonized system number. So I'm making a big assumption here that you've got the right HS number. HS classification, whole other thing. Mark Cooper's your guy because I heard him do a presentation on HS classification once. It was very good. But assuming you have the right HS number for your product, then we can look up the rule of origin. We're also going to have to probably build out kind of a bill of materials. What do you have to buy to make your product? What goes into it? Where does it come from? How is it classified? That's all going to take patience and time to build something like that. So again, just kind of for your reference, HS classification, make sure that you're using the correct one. If you do need training, that training that Mark did last year, it was very good. Here's the link to it. You can still, I think it's like it got set to like $10 after the fact, but you can still sit through the recording of it. Or maybe he'll do another one for the deck, for the Lunch and Learn at some point, if there's enough demand for that. So substantial transformation and tariff shift rules. Most of the questions that we get are going to be on how do you qualify, and that's some kind of a transformation of the good. And we might prove that either by looking at the classification of the good compared to all the stuff that you buy to make it, or it might actually be doing math, the value of the ingredients, the inputs, the materials you use compared to the cost of the finished good. Usually that does not include just simple combining or packaging or repackaging or dilution. There's got to be real value added proved, and I think you'll see that as we go through some examples, that's what it all comes back to. Is there real value added production or locally sourced materials to show that there's value put in the U.S. usually for most of the companies we work with. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the countries on the right. They're kind of smaller trading partners, and for the most part, it's the same rule. You've got to prove 35% of the appraised value includes either materials from within the U.S. or value-added production within the U.S. But they kind of all have the same rules for all products. We're going to spend a lot more time on the left side, the tariff shift and regional value content type free trade agreements. That includes USMCA, again, two of our biggest trading partners for most states, and most of the other free trade agreements that companies are shipping to those countries and have questions about. So, as I mentioned, where to find rules of origin? You have a few options. One of the things that I do every year is I go to the U.S. International Trade Commission website, and it's linked here, and you'll have that link in the PDF. And the General Notes chapter of the U.S. Harmonized Tariff Schedule is updated every January. Every January, I download that big fat PDF. And all of the rules of origin for every free trade agreement the U.S. has are in those general notes. So you need to make sure you're in the right country's FTA section, which will be kind of a header at the top of the page, and then you find your HS number. If there are changes to a rule, sometimes companies complain or an industry complains, and maybe they do edit the rule. All of the free trade agreements have a process for doing that. It doesn't happen a lot, but if they are published anywhere in their most updated form, that general notes section of the Harmonized Tariff Schedule is going to have them. You can go to the USTR, the U.S. Trade Representative's website. That's the agency that actually negotiates our free trade agreements, or has in the past. Now apparently everybody's involved in negotiating the new tariff rates, but they're still involved. They have the original text of all those FTAs on their website, but again, they might be quite old, and it's possible that the rule may have changed. The Rules of Origin Facilitator, I don't know how often they update that one, but that's the one I mentioned where it's worldwide. You can plug in any two countries, and it'll tell you if there's a free trade agreement or any kind of beneficial trade agreement between them. So I would highly recommend downloading that general notes chapter. Just download the PDF once a year. If you got to look up a rule, that's the place to look it up. So a few common concepts within rules of origin. Wholly of, meaning everything that went into this thing was local. I got it from within the U.S. That doesn't mean your supplier was located in the U.S. The actual thing itself is from the U.S. Wholly of is almost exclusively reserved for commodities, agricultural commodities, or coal. Things where you can point to that patch of earth where that thing totally came from. So that almost never applies to manufactured goods. There's just too many moving parts. Metals, who knows where they came from originally. Wholly of is generally for agricultural commodities. Goods purchased from originating materials. That might be a little more likely. If you say, well, I source all my stuff in the U.S. to make my good, it's wholly originating materials. It might be, but you're going to want to track down through your supply chain and get as much documentation as you can from your suppliers to prove that that material, when you bought it from them, was originating on its own. And sometimes that's tough because sometimes suppliers might not know, or they're not familiar with free trade agreements. They haven't been through a training like this, and they can't really provide you any proof because it's just not something they're familiar with. So you might have to deal with that. Most of the time for a manufactured good, you're going to be applying the rules of origin. And for that one group, as I said, it's kind of the 35% with substantial transformation. And you'll get that formula. Or it's like USMCA, where we're talking about either a tariff shift or regional value content. I hope this will make more sense when I run through a couple of examples. So again, wholly of, all materials traced to the earth of the FTA country. Agricultural commodities are mostly it. So for the countries that I mentioned that we don't get too many questions on, it's 35% of the appraised value, and there is the formula. This formula is going to look real familiar when we talk about regional value content and the other ones, but you're always somehow comparing the final price of your good to the price of the materials that you use to make it. And you might be looking at the total originating value, or you might be looking at the non-originating value, depending on what the formula is. So this will make a little bit more sense with some of our examples. So just to take a look at what do these rules even look like? How do they read? How would I recognize one? As you can see, these are a lot of different rules. Some are very short. A change to subheading 790310 from any other chapter. That's about as short and sweet as a rule gets. But then you can see there's a rule like these darker blue ones where it's a lot longer, and then they talk about percentages and methods. I know those look more complicated, but actually those rules are sometimes better because they give you two different options. Both the tariff shift, where we just look at the classification of the stuff. Okay, if that didn't work out, then we can look at actually doing the math with values. So a longer rule looks more complicated, but it might give you more options. It might actually be better. All right, let's take a look at a couple of pretty simple samples. Now you're going to say like, oh my God, this is so easy. My product is super complicated, but the process is the same. You are looking at your finished good. That's what you sell to your customer. And then what do you use to make that? So this is a California wine spritzer. Sounds lovely on a nice warm day like today. And we know its classification is 2206. So if we have the HS classification, we can look up the rule of origin. We're shipping this to Australia. Our good friends in Australia would like our California wine spritzer. And we know that the rule of origin is a change to heading 2203 through 2209, so it's covering a group. It's not just the one product, from any heading outside of that group. The heading is the 4-digit level of an HS number. And you'll get to know that very well as you look at rules of origin. So we only have two ingredients, two materials that go into our finished good. We have wine, and that's 2204, and fruit juice, 2007. So we have to make a change from 2203 from any heading outside that group. Okay, one of those headings is inside the group. It's wine. So we're going to have to worry about where that wine comes from. The fruit juice is outside of it. We could source that fruit juice from anywhere in the world, and it would change enough compared to the classification of our finished product and still qualify. But the wine is going to have to come from within the U.S. If it comes from within the U.S., we're not worried about the cost. It doesn't have to make a shift because it's already originating because it's from within the U.S. And as we said, wine, that's one of those agricultural commodities. We can point to the earth where those grapes were grown and became wine. So for this good, we would have to source the wine in the U.S. in order that, because wine is always going to fall within that range. So if we bought Chilean wine, it would never qualify because we couldn't change it enough based on that rule. So we're going to have to source that wine in the U.S. if we wanted to qualify for the U.S.-Australia Free Trade Agreement. As you may know, the Australians produce some great wine. If we buy Australian wine and turn it into this spritzer, that's okay. Again, it's those two countries that are partners in this agreement. We can use Australian wine, combine it with fruit juice from anywhere, and it's still going to qualify for the FTA. So I hope that makes sense. I'm going to do one more tariff shift example. And if it doesn't make sense, please throw in a chat question. Okay, let's take a look at this ring. Again, kind of simple, doesn't have a lot of things that go into it. This is from the U.S.-Korea Free Trade Agreement. We've classified our ring. We have its HS number. That lets us look at the rule. Reads pretty similar. It's just that short and sweet one doesn't give us any percentages. It's just a change to this heading group from any heading outside of that group. And again, keep in mind, it's those first four digits. So what does that mean? The materials that we use to make this ring have to, if they're imported from outside either the U.S. or Korea, have to undergo some kind of a change, which we will be able to prove based on their classification. We only have two materials that go into it, so it makes it a little easy. We have the sapphire, and then we have platinum. So we get the sapphires from Australia, and since we import them, it's pretty easy to find their HS classification. It's 710391. The platinum, we get it from Canada. It's 711010. So as I mentioned, we're trying to qualify this for the U.S.-Korea Free Trade Agreement. We happen to buy these materials from countries where we have an FTA also, two separate FTAs. Does it matter that we have FTAs with these other countries? For this purpose, no, it doesn't. You only get credit for who's in that little family. And right now, we're trying to qualify Korea and U.S. But the good news is this good is going to qualify. So sapphire 7103, that does not fall within the group. It's outside of the group. That's good. And then the platinum 7110 also does not fall within that group that we're worried about, 7113 through 7118. So even though we have 100% imported materials from outside that FTA family we're trying to qualify for, this good qualifies. It shows that we've changed it enough. We've put enough value into it that we've made a totally new thing, and it's so new and classified so differently that that proves we've put real value into it, and it's going to qualify for the free trade agreement. Any questions on tariff shift? Again, those are simple products with only a couple of things that go into them, but the process is really the same even if you had a list of 15 components that you buy to make your product. So that was tariff shift. Some rules are short, and tariff shift is your only option. The longer rules that we took a quick look at, where we saw there was a percentage based on certain methods, that's giving you this regional value content. Again, you're proving that value added. But instead of doing it by looking at the classification of the stuff you use to make your product, you're looking at the value, and then you're comparing it to your finished product cost. What are you selling it for? So let's take a look at a sample of that. This is just to show you what those rules typically look like. They have like an A part and a B part. This happens to be for flashlights. The A part is always that tariff shift. And if you can qualify the product under tariff shift, and that's easier for you, that's great, you're done. You don't even have to worry about the regional value content part of the rule. So see this magical or? That's what you want to see. So if you qualify it under tariff shift for that A part of the rule, you don't even have to look at the B part of the rule. You don't have to do this. But very often it exists because there might be something you put in your product that's like parts of, and sometimes parts of, if it's really specific, are going to be nearly under the same HS heading. So that's why they give you this option of regional value content. So again, it's kind of a second option. If you can qualify under the first one, you don't have to do it, but it is an option, so that's good. So that you have the formulas, this is the USMCA. There's two different methods. And again, this is the same language that we had in NAFTA, the transaction value method, where you're looking at the selling price. So you're looking at all the imported stuff you might put in the good. You're running that through a formula where you're comparing that to your selling price to your customer. The net cost method, very similar, but instead of the selling price, you're looking at your net cost to produce that good. And you can see kind of in the footnote there, that's what you can and can't include in the net cost. So that gets a little more specific. Happy to talk about that later at some point. But most companies, if they're doing USMCA, they're probably doing transaction value method because your selling price is a lot easier to figure out than your net cost. For all of our other free trade agreements that have regional value content, the formulas are called build up or build down. And the big difference between them, they're both using the selling price, which adjusted value, usually that's the selling price. The big difference between them is, are we adding up all the value of originating materials, stuff that we did source and can prove we sourced within this FTA family, or is it easier just to add up all the stuff that we know either doesn't qualify, isn't originating, or we're not sure where it comes from? Because if we can't prove where it comes from, then unfortunately, as I mentioned on this slide, if you can't figure out where it's from, what its origin is, you cannot include it in originating, so it becomes non-originating. So let's plug this into an example real quick. This is for a chair. This is the rule. So let's say we've got to take a look at these formulas and plug some things in. What you're going to do for pretty much any product, and again, if yours has 100 components, this list might be a lot longer, but the process is the same. We know what our finished product is. We know what we sell it for. And here are all the things that go into making it. We might need to know our HS number if we're going to try tariff shift first. And we're certainly going to need to know the origin of those goods because we might have to run the numbers both ways. Is it originating? Is it not originating? There is kind of a shortcut where you could assume, let's assume nothing is originating. And you can run those numbers and see if that works. And if it does, that's great because then you don't have to worry about where you source your stuff from and you could change it as often as you need to. So plugging that same list of materials for this chair into those two methods, taking a look at the build up method, we're going to look at build down first. Build down, you might notice, is the same formula as the transaction value in USMCA. So if you're already very familiar with USMCA and that transaction value method, the build down method is the exact same formula. We're taking the selling price, we're subtracting the total value of non-originating materials. And again, that's anything that comes from outside this FTA family of countries, or that the origin is unknown. So it becomes non-originating. We sell our chair for $400. The total value of all of the goods that we put in is $229. So sometimes, as I said, it's worth running that shortcut. Let's assume nothing qualifies before we start looking up the origin of everything, and let's see where we get. Unfortunately, we only get to 42.75% here. And as you may remember with that, usually you have to get to 60% for transaction value method or the build down method. Most of the times the number you'll see is you have to exceed 60%. So then you take a second look. You go in and look, is anything can I get credit for any of the materials that I've sourced for this product as originating so that I can make that number lower? We're working with percentages, so what we want is that value of non-originating materials to be as low as possible. So we take a second look, and you'll notice that the wood for our chair here comes from Canada. If we're qualifying this for USMCA, Canada's part of that family, part of that FTA family, so we can take out that $150. That's already originating. We rerun the numbers where our non-originating materials has now gone down to only $79, and now we're at 80%. We're past 80%. So we are well past that 60% that we needed to qualify with this regional value content. Any questions on RVC or tariff shift? The more examples that you look up, usually the better. It tends to explain it pretty well. So if anybody's got any questions on that, I'll address them. If not, we will kind of speed through the rest. Okay, I don't see anything there now. So claiming FTA preference, you've done all this homework, you've done the math, or you've done all the research. You assume responsibility for the data as the manufacturer. You're the one in the best position to provide that information. But you're going to have to provide it for your customer somehow. Probably your customer is doing the import. The import broker is probably working for them. But the burden of proof is for you to provide that for them. Documentation certificates. Not one of our free trade agreements has a specific certificate anymore. We used to have a specific one for Israel, and we used to have a specific one for NAFTA. That's no longer true. Now it can kind of take any format that you want it to, but you've got to let your customer know certain specific things. This is a link here to Customs and Border Protection. They do have a sample certificate of origin that you can download. And here are the very specific instructions on how to do that. It's not just like you click on it and you open it like any other PDF on the internet. It's kind of weird. You've got to right click, you've got to save it, and then you've got to open it separately. So that's the best directions that I've seen on that. But you can use that as a sample. It doesn't have to. These are the data elements required for USMCA. And as I mentioned, USTR has the original text of all of our FTAs, and each one of them will have a section on documenting origin and what information you have to provide. So they're going to have a list like this. And most of them are the same thing. Who are you? Who are you selling to? What's the HS number? And how does it qualify? And usually one of the most useful, it qualifies under the rule of origin for this product. So those are the data elements. And then, of course, you have to sign it, you have to date it, and you have to provide your contact information. And whoever does that and provides it to the buyer is probably going to get the first call from that foreign customs authority if they have any questions. So make sure whoever does sign it knows what they're signing. Record keeping, you do have a requirement to keep these records and all of your calculations for 5 years. That's what all of our free trade agreements say. The other thing I'll mention on the record keeping is how often do you go and revisit these numbers? And a lot of that depends on, well, what method do you use? Have you changed your supply chain? and how close were you to that percentage if you were using regional value content. So that's something you could think about, like how often do we have to take another look at this? If you totally change your supply chain, your qualifications certainly might change if it's coming from somewhere different or the values have changed. Thank you. I will also show you one more thing that I put in the last 2 slides. I mentioned that National Association of District Export Councils letter that kind of talked about where are we now as we hit July 7th, which was supposed to be the original deadline for this new negotiation. This is the newsletter that they sent out. So, and you can get to that. Let's see. NADEC trade. I think this link should work. So I think you can sign up for the newsletter. I don't think you have to be a DEC member to get it, but I think if you go on the National Association of DECs, you can sign up to get their newsletter. I don't think you necessarily have to be a DEC member. So that is a really, really quick run through rules of origin and kind of how customs officials think and what they're looking at. But as I said, the real theme is it all comes back to value added. Have you put in value either from, how you do the production process, the design you've put into it, the materials you source? Is there real U.S. value in that product to make it qualify for the FTA? That's kind of the overriding theme for originating and meeting those rules. So happy to take some more questions. We can go back and look at more websites if that's useful. I see a question on getting a copy of the slides. I think Mark and Andrew, you just asked that they email you.
Yeah, if you want it sent to you, email Mark or myself. I'll put my email in the address.
I was going to say, you want to put your emails in the chat?
Yes. And also, it'll be posted on our website. So it'll be.
Rudy, I see your hand is raised, so feel free to come off mute and ask a question.
Okay. Let me see here.
Oh.
Yeah.
There you go. Now I hear you.
The question was, and maybe it was answered before and I just missed it. Is this webinar presentation, the entire thing, going to be sent to us?
Yes. Rudy, if you want to send me an email, or Mark, we can actually send you the actual presentation. But you all ought to know that both the presentation, the document, the PowerPoint, along with the recording, will be posted on our website, and I'm going to post where it will be posted within the next couple of days. But you can look for it there.
Yeah,
IndianaDeck.org. All of our webinars are posted there, along with the slides, and you can see what we did in March, which is again on tariffs, but on the import side, how to mitigate U.S. tariffs.
That's terrific. I mean, obviously, fantastic information, but a lot of information. So, viewing the webinar again and then maybe again asking some questions after that might be useful.
Mark knows where to find me.
Yeah,
I can find her. Okay. Well,
Rashawn, I see your hand raised, and I see you put a question in the chat about grant funds. Is that about STEP grants funds?
You're muted.
If it is, at least what I'm hearing from my state is they're putting in an application. They are hoping to get STEP grant money come October.
That's the same.
Nobody has said they're not getting it.
That's the same from Indiana. So.
Okay.
Yeah. So you were addressing my question about the grant funds?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is that the grant you meant?
Yeah. What's up with the grant money? Because I was working with Mark and everybody with the MTA. And we don't have no funding no more right now for the program.
The MDCP. We're talking about MDCP, right?
Okay.
MDCP, right. What's up with that? No?
Well, the funding was not renewed as far as I know, was it,
Yeah.
Meredith?
I don't think MDCP is going to exist at least for the foreseeable future. I don't think
Right.
they plan to add that back in. We're
that
hoping
we
we
know
can
of.
rescue STEP, but that might
Yeah,
be about
yeah.
it.
That's right.
We still
I'm
have
gonna show you
money in Indiana.
Okay.
We still have in-step funds that are available for Indiana companies wanting to apply, and they're taking applications. How long that money will hold remains a question. But they, like Nebraska, are applying for a renewed sourcing for
Good.
2026.
Mark, can you email me the information, what he's talking about?
Sure. We can email you that. No problem.
Thank you. I'm working Pacers right now. I'm working All Star, so I gotta go. I was here for one
Okay.
second. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I think that's it for the presentation. Meredith, thank you very much. It's a pleasure as always. Great information for
Yeah.
all of our participants. I'll turn it over to Andrew for final comments.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Meredith. That is a whirlwind, but the information is all there. I can't thank you enough. That was an excellent presentation. As we look towards the future, we're going to have a webinar in September 19th on e-commerce. That's what's scheduled. We may, revisit HS classification, and I'll talk to Mark about that. That may be a webinar we need to do. We haven't done that on behalf of the deck for a long time. And all of you listening, actually, before you sign off, if you could say yes or no if you're interested in having an HS schedule classification webinar, because as we've learned today, post it in the chat if we've learned today and in March. A mitigating factor or a way to mitigate the incoming tariffs is to make sure you've got your HS classification up to the right classification. Sometimes when you update the process, you'll find you actually classify in a different area or different HS code, and that might have a pleasant surprise on the tariff if you're importing that good. So, okay, it looks, Mark, we may need to think about that.
Okay. Well, this is great. We're excited, and thanks for everyone for tuning in today and being a part of our webinar. Stay tuned for more exciting webinars in the future as our deck continues to plumb the depths of the export process for all Indiana companies and folks in the region. So thank you very much for joining, and we appreciate you being a part of our webinar today, and we'll sign off until next time. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Good to be with you all.
Great job, Meredith.